here in West Auckland, sitting in the same spots. I'm Andy Mitchell from Catapult, and in Wellington is my colleague, Mr. Hamish Conway. And together, we just give you a very, very warm welcome back to Survive to Thrive, which, if you've been with us before, you know all too well, is a weekly webinar series by New Zealand's exporters for New Zealand's exporters as we work our way through this particularly difficult time in our businesses to try to find a path to greater prosperity. Last week, if you were with us, you'll recall that we were talking about the latest happenings in real time from North America. And we've moved our attention this week all the way around the world towards the UK and towards Europe as well. So we're incredibly lucky today to be joined by six amazing guests from both sides of the world who are going to bring their particular perspective and insights, not just on what's happening, but also on how to change and pivot and think about your business through this time as well. So as Hamish has said, throughout this, this is being done by you, for you. So please jump into it and throw as many thoughts and comments into the chat as you possibly can and into the Q&A, because we're here to answer your questions as well. But without further ado, I'm going to ask our amazing panelists to introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Catherine Corridge. Catherine, kia ora, good morning.
Kia ora, Catherine Corridge. I'm of a company called Systock. We've been exporting for over 20 years. We have a big base in UK serving Europe and the world from that end of the planet, and also NZ.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you.
Frank, good morning. Kia ora. Could you introduce yourself?
Frank. Do you want Frank Van der Velden? Yeah.
I've been
okay. Yeah. And apologies, for some reason Zoom won't allow me to do video, and I don't know why. But anyway, Frank Van der Velden from Touchpoint Group. We've set up in the UK just since May last year, based in Auckland. I'm back in New Zealand, but I should really be in the UK.
Thank you. Other Frank Owen, good morning.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Speaking to you from Vienna in Austria. I represent a strategy and leadership development organisation active across France, Germany, UK, and some of the Eastern European countries as well.
Wonderful. Welcome, Frank. Emma and Pura, good morning.
Kia ora, good morning. Emma Loisel. I'm the co-founder and chair of Volcano Coffee Works, an assembly coffee based in London. I'm based in New Zealand. I'm also on the board of Kia, Karma Drinks, and the new NZVIF, New Zealand Capital Growth Partners.
Wonderful. Welcome. Thank you, Emma. James, good morning.
Good morning. I'm James, founder, CEO of a company called Egmont Honey, based in New Plymouth. We're a producer, packer, marketer of New Zealand honey, mostly Manuka honey. We export about 1,000 tonne of honey a year across a number of different countries.
Thank you, James. And from wonderful Taranaki over to Paddington in London, and finally to Peter. Good morning, Peter.
Yeah, good morning. Pete Gillingwater, based in London, a Kiwi, been here for 33 years. CEO of Newfound Global. We help technology companies go international for overseas markets, New Zealand, Australia, into the UK, and vice versa. I also sit on the global board of Kia. So I was on a board meeting this morning at 7 o'clock. So it's been a long old day, but glad to be here.
Well, thank you so much for making the effort, and thank you to all our panelists, because your schedules across multiple hemispheres are pretty packed at the moment, so we're very lucky to have you. Hamish, just before we start, what was the result of that poll, just so we understand?
So it's probably looking like there's not a full, it's only 60% of the people on, but well, and it says a lot of people here are currently not exporting to the UK and Europe, so that's interesting context as well, just in terms of if people are looking for new markets to be selling to, then I guess after today, you'll find potentially some opportunities there for you to look at into the future. So,
yeah. And today's all about opportunities. So I'm just going to turn to you first, Emma, if I may. From your perspective, leading Kia in that region, you've obviously got a really close understanding of what's happening for Kiwi businesses. Is Europe and the UK open for business at the moment?
Yes, well, my role at Volcano Coffee Works is where I really have my boots on the ground at the moment. I spent 20 years in the UK. I've been back in New Zealand for 2.5 years. It is open, but it is a very, very different market. We have seen if I speak from Volcano Coffee Works, we had 95% of our business close overnight because we're a wholesale distributor, so we sell to cafes, restaurants, hotels. We had to pivot very quickly to online and other opportunities around grocery. There is what's interesting is that it's driving our diversification, and that is creating new opportunity that we didn't expect. We expected to take 18 months to develop, and we've developed it in 4 weeks.
So this theme we've been hearing week after week on these panels about technologies and things changing our approach to our business really, really quickly. When we look at Europe, plainly, I mean, Peter, you're sitting right in the heart of it in Vienna there. Should we be looking at Europe on a path to recovery as one block, or should we be breaking it down into individual regions and states? How should we best imagine the situation?
Andy, obviously, I'm based in London, and you know, we're in lockdown at the moment, and you know, it's sometimes hard to see what's happening out of my house at the moment, although across Europe. But you know, I think if you're a Kiwi exporter, you know, irrespective of whatever sector you have, I think there's still tremendous opportunity in Europe. Maybe, you know, not simple. You can't jump on a plane for a while, but there's still plenty of things you can look at post-COVID as opportunities. You know, there are high growth areas that are going to emerge from the COVID age that we're in at the moment. And as you know, any business, no matter what you're doing, whatever produce or service you have, you know, there could well be opportunities over here. But the key thing you have to do is validate and research and make sure you do your homework. You know, it's very difficult to assess from New Zealand. So you've got to work with trade agencies like NZTE, and there's, you know, obviously a lot of companies out there that can help and support you. But you know, you've got to really do your homework, despite there being huge opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the political response that we're seeing, I mean, plainly our news feeds are caught up with the headlines with politicians. Catherine, from your perspective, is it useful for business people and exporters here to follow the latest individual political differences and stories that have been fed to us? Or should we just sit back and look to ourselves and our leadership abilities to be able to see us through this?
I think that's a really good question, because when you think about news feeds, you'll be fed more of what you're looking at. So it's really important to look beyond your normal news feed to understand what's really happening in the world. The political perspective is focused primarily on health at present, and the economics will start to emerge much more as a stronger theme when countries know that their people are safe. So the key message that I would have around services is that there is real opportunity globally, but we need to temper that with a sensitivity to the fact that the rest of the world is perhaps, with larger populations, facing more health challenge at the moment. There's potentially more to come, and so on. So think about working with Kiwi people who've been on the ground for some time and who understand the real mood from their staff and from the daily conversations that we're all having.
So from this points, just over to you, Frank, on this. In New Zealand, I mean, plainly we're very fortunate in that our location and our response has been, from a social point of view, has been so strong. And as a result, what we're experiencing is quite different to what companies and countries and societies in Europe have been experiencing as well. It's like what lessons should we take from the difference of our experiences here and how we deal with our markets as we move through this crisis?
I think it's important just to establish where your other party is, whether it's your customers or your employees. Where are their heads right now? Because, you know, they're walking through treacle to a large extent. They're all dealing with having to work out of completely new places, out of homes, out of unfamiliar circumstances, learning new technologies. So it just is a case of putting yourself in their shoes and realizing that that's all going on at the same time as you're seeking to support them. So that would be one item. I think as well, just be very careful with your assumptions from what you know, you believe you know, because consumer behaviours and consumer behaviour drives a great deal of the economy beyond the consumer itself, has changed and is likely to continue to have changed for some period before we enter into some degree of new normalcy. So I think it's all about rechecking assumptions, and just taking the time to touch, pause, and engage with your clients. You need to talk to your clients, that's for sure. You can't just say nothing, but you just need to work out how to connect with them in the right way.
So across the different connections which you're having across so many industries, Emma, if I may turn to you, then are there certain sectors that appear to be recovering more quickly, or is everybody under the same weight of pressure at the moment?
I think I'm seeing it in different areas. So food and beverage has done well through this time, but it was all about the channels you had set up before the lockdown. Yeah. So those that were in the groceries, etc., have done well. Now, most challenger brands aren't. 80% don't sell into that grocery market. So therefore, what we've seen is the larger companies do well and the smaller companies suffer. And they're the ones that have had to really, really pivot fast. I have another investment, from my angel investment days, in the medical imaging. They've set up the imaging behind all of the Nightingale hospitals. They couldn't get in through GE, into the NHS. Now all of a sudden the NHS is just saying, quick, spin them up as wherever you can. So the opportunity is the speed that you're seeing if you can capitalize on it.
Now, opportunities plainly out there. James, you're looking at this situation through an incredibly practical perspective, taking honey into European markets in hugely successful volumes. Are you seeing opportunity at the present moment, or are you seeing barriers? How does it feel for you?
A little bit of both, to be honest. We're obviously very lucky that we're classed as an essential business here in New Zealand, so the factory runs pretty much as normal with a bit of social distancing measures that have had to reconfigure packing rooms and things. We're lucky enough that we've seen a spike in sales due to the perceived immunity around Manuka honey, but it's also coming with its challenges as well. For instance, in the UK, we're with Holland and Barrett. We're on a buy one get one for a penny sale at the moment, but it's out of stock simply because their distribution centre and logistics can't keep up with the demand. So there's plenty of stock sitting in there, but we can't get it out the door. And talking to their buying team, literally whatever is the most accessible in their DC at the moment is what is being able to be purchased online. If you're in an inconvenient part of their warehouse, you're out of stock on the website. So, good from a demand point of view, but the logistics are obviously affecting things a little bit for us.
Yeah, plainly. Frank, from your perspective, I mean, you'll see the impact in retail across a number of different sectors. It's like when we're trying to understand what consumer sentiment is and what the potential for sell-through is, are there some lessons that you can share from the way that retailers are behaving at the present moment, the challenges, just like James has expressed, operationally, into which you might give us a guide to what's coming up in the coming months?
Are you talking to me?
Sorry, Frank Owen. I got too many Franks this morning.
Yeah, I know. Okay, that's the Frank Owen. Okay, cool.
It's like, sorry, Frank.
Yeah, the situation in retail is that you've really got this reawakening into the bricks and mortar related space at the moment. So it's all pivoted strongly towards e-commerce across Europe. And I think the big takeaway here is that there's been a lot of barriers to the take-up of e-commerce and online distribution across Germany, even France, and particularly Austria and Switzerland. Very much cash-based economies. And of course, that has gone right out of favour. Nobody wants to be talking cash, so all the limits are raised, of course, with the card payments. And so you've got this real shift now. The delivery merchants are ramping up for the last mile. So the real retail structure is going to change quite dramatically over in mainland Europe over the next 6 to 12 months.
So do you think over the next while, this transition from bricks and mortar plainly to direct and through online is going to stay, or do you think we're going to retreat back? Should we be changing our strategies in terms of our channel selection?
I think anybody who says they can answer that question is to be taken with a pinch of salt. I think it's really important to get yourself around the right watering holes, right? Get yourself connected to places which can give you the information that can give you advance warning on trends. Okay, look at where you used to, get your information. try to look for different sources right now, those that you can trust and those that you can test, because they're going to give you the early indicators. And you're looking for early indicators which you can then double down on for these new behaviours, because we don't know what the new consumer behaviours are right now. But what we do know is it's going to be really important for us to stay close to them, right? And so that's where the focus should go.
So Catherine, to you, it sounds like here that's all we can do right now is stitch together as many individual pieces of information as we possibly can. And our in-market partners, be they distributors or channel partners, will become more and more important. So from a leadership point of view, we want to tell the UK and Europe that we're still open for business. How should we go about doing this, and how should we go about working with our partners in market slightly differently to be able to get the information that we need and potentially uncover some advantage so we can actually act on it?
I think there's a few things that have come out of the conversation so far. The key one is collaboration. As Kiwi companies, we need to trust and collaborate more, trust each other more. So there's very much within the New Zealand setting a sense that we're all competitors if we're in the same industry. When we go global, we're not large enough for us to go head on with the large global companies, but through collaboration we can do a lot. One example is SysStock, which is services, and I know we're talking mostly about product. We're a services company. We have global framework agreements with some of the largest organisations in the world. They have trusted us enough to give us those global framework agreements, and we respect them and deliver to them. If we thought differently as New Zealanders, we could say, how could we use some of the great platforms we already have in place to deliver fantastic services? And at this point in time, when we know that New Zealand is open for business for so many reasons, I think we've got huge opportunities. So a little bit of a shift and recognise what we can achieve by exporting more and more high value services.
So thank you, Catherine. So Frank, your perspective on this will be hugely viable, because plainly your recent entry into the UK market driving very, very high value services, this pivot towards collaboration rather than competition, towards sharing resources and opportunity, are you seeing that come alive and come to fruition inside your sector?
I'll talk about two examples because they're kind of quite different. Uber Eats, for example, which we service throughout Europe, is going gangbusters. And the reason that's going back gangbusters, it's all digital, and obviously all the shutdown and that kind of thing. So the opportunity with them is they want to understand their customers better. So we provide analytics for that. In the UK, however, where we're focused on financial services, typically banking and insurance sectors, they're going through a huge amount of pressure at the moment, mainly because all their branches are shut down, especially in the retail banks. Everyone's going to the contact centres, so that's putting pressure on the contact centres, and whether they've been outsourced to India or whatever, they all of a sudden have to put their contact centres, people in the homes and what have you. You've got people who've been working at home from the Canary Wharf from the city. They've been working from home for the past 6 weeks, and they've got all the pressures of that. So the consoling thing that I think we as Kiwis can bring is actually we're striving for business as usual. We're seeing beyond this COVID situation. And the thing that we've found with, especially in a business development sense, and I know Peter would be interested in this, is that it's easier to get to talk to people. Sure, it's video conference, you're not going to be meeting them for a coffee. It's easier to get to people. So for Kiwis who we have a good reputation, who they've got the right products, hitting the right message, are empathetic enough, you can actually cut through and actually talk to people that otherwise you would not have been able to talk to. But at the end of the day, we believe where it's going to all come out, digital will be the driving force. It's just been accelerated, and companies come out the back end of this, they're going to be looking to cut costs. So if you can provide in services and products that actually cut costs, especially in the software world, then you're going to win.
Emma, just for a second, so I understand that from the first poll, about 60% of the people on the call today are looking at UK and Europe potentially for the first time. Could you just explain to everybody who's new to this market actually how Kia as an organisation can help create those conversations which Frank was just talking about? What is it, and how can they engage? Because it feels like a really, really powerful tool for us right now.
Absolutely. Kia I see Kia as the mind map of New Zealanders offshore. So we have this incredible resource of talent and capability in our market. And what Kia does is bring those together and enable access to them. We work very closely with NZTE. And if you think about them helping the businesses get ready, we then often are the people that they reach out to say, who do we know? And the ability to reach into organisations. I've actually used Kia myself during this pandemic. I needed to get access into another bank because I was, one banking relationship at the moment was a bad situation to be in. And within half a day, I had access into the bank I wanted to through Kia, and it was a great example of me being at the board level, but also going, help me to get me what I need, and they absolutely jumped on it. So I think it's this real demonstration of collaboration, but collaboration works when people pay forward. And I think I used to laugh before COVID, when I used to fly up to London and think if I got everyone on NZ1 to stand up who was representing one product, I had a game with myself that I bet half the plane would stand up. And actually, this is where New Zealand needs to approach things differently. I think we've got some wonderful examples like the Beer Collective. We're not going to be travelling into these markets ourselves as in the short term, medium term as much. And I think New Zealand, it's really echoes what Catherine says, is that the opportunity for New Zealand is to say we're open, but also say we're going to collaborate like no one else in the market. And that's using the networks of Kia, that's really working with NZTE, but it's actually really working together. When you don't know, there's necessarily individual benefit for it. If I give you, an example on Volcano Coffee Works, we're in the process of launching Friends of Volcano. These are brands that Karma drinks that we're just promoting together to enable us to reach each other's audiences and to actually make sure that we're all sort of supporting each other through this. So I think for New Zealanders here, really think who you can work with, that you might not know exactly what's going to be in it for you at that time, but if everyone works together, we'll be in a better place.
It is indeed a time to pay it forward. I guess another thing that's been impacted in terms of our ability to understand and validate its markets are trade shows and trade commissions as well. Frank van der Velde, I understand that you've got some initiatives coming through inside your sector that might see virtual trade shows happening. Could you give us an update on that, please?
Yeah, sure. So the key things that are coming through is, I guess at the end of the day, we're looking at how companies better able to look after their customers. So the key things that are coming through at the moment is vulnerable customers, because of obviously the impact of COVID. Organised, especially in financial service, they want to know how can they actually do better. Be more empathetic with customers rather than actually fall back to what they did during GFC, where they unfortunately alienated a lot of customers. The key thing is they're actually looking for innovation. Actually, it's the same down in New Zealand and Australia actually as well. They're more open to innovation at this time because not necessarily the current ways of doing things actually fits today. So there's quite a bit of acceleration and innovation. Again, coming back to that contact centre world.
Yeah, and Peter, I mean, you're obviously very, very deep in both tech and B2B market there. It's like, what are your feelings on our ability to use new technology to be able to validate and to access new partners and new relationships?
Sure. Just before I answer that, I think it's probably worth pointing out that New Zealand's success in dealing with COVID is quite big news up here in the UK. In fact, there was an article in the FT today around, perhaps it's the place where companies should be sending their top teams to be based out of, so they're COVID-free and able to create amazing companies globally. So, the story of New Zealand's success is a good story over here, and therefore, I think, anything coming out of New Zealand towards the UK is very positively received. Just your point about virtual trade shows, we're putting together a program at the moment, which will be launched soon, that will actually allow Kiwi companies to do as much as they possibly can whilst they can't fly, to be able to check out the marketplace and to be able to actually see whether they can be successful up here. And I think technology is going to be a significant driver for everything we do, not just Zoom calls, which of course are becoming everyday life for many of us, but actually to be able to plan ahead and if in fact really to be able to get as much data insights to the opportunities out there. There's amazing tools. The innovation at the moment we're seeing is accelerating. So people are now forced to come up with new solutions, new ideas to deal with things that perhaps weren't a problem. And so we're going to see an acceleration in many business practices And I think, if I was an engineer, software engineer back in NZ, I'd be thinking about how to solve these problems. And Frank V came up with a good point, around, things such as efficiencies, saving money, helping people out in problem areas. So it's trying to solve problems, I think, is the key thing here. Kiwis are very good problem solvers. So, I'd urge all engineers start thinking about these problems because they're big over here.
Absolutely.
Andy, do you mind if I add to that, especially what Emma was saying? I think given the environment we're at the moment, there are so many really good Kiwis in London. And I know Tanya's on this call as well, and Tanya does a fantastic job. She's a networker from from London, although she's in New Zealand at the moment. And that, she's been incredibly successful for us in terms of I've made friends with people and become very, very good professionally with some very good Kiwis in the UK. And honestly, at this time, and this building on what Peter's saying, we can be proud as Kiwis as what is actually being achieved here in New Zealand. It's a great story, but leverage the Kiwis in the market. They are so willing to help.
Yes, a very, very good point. And again, this comes down to acting together and to living.
Correct.
It's been a recurring theme. One thing that I know that we'll be interested to hear at the present moment is about access to market. For anybody who's been following this, it's been a recurring theme. And one of the biggest challenges, of course, is our reliance on air freights. And the fact that has now dropped out and is only slowly coming back. Catherine, I mean, you spend a huge amount of your professional time at the moment working with the airline industry to help them through this process. Are there some reasons to be optimistic about the return of more reliable, better priced air freight in the near future, or is this just a case of wait and see?
I think where the aviation industry is at the moment globally is in a planning to return to service phase. So any crystal ball gazing on pricing and so on would be outside of my remit. But I think the key thing that I can say is that there is a really determined industry working collaboratively, and the airline industry aviation always works collaboratively, but in a way that you would all be proud of. So things are happening. I believe that New Zealand will be well positioned for an early return to service and for a safe return to service, because we have fantastic biosecurity incursion response models and other things that make the underlying industry structures very resilient. So it's a slight wait and see in terms of the moment that things come back on, but freight is moving, and that's something important to remember. Freight is moving around the world, and that will increase as we go forward.
So as that freight moves through, Emma, it's like you've got experience of massive local distribution. Are there still blockages in terms of the last mile of getting freight through to end users if you're selling direct as well, or is that starting to come back as well?
Royal Mail's challenging. I think we'll hopefully see more investment in that going forward. But I think actually one thing I would also echo on what Catherine just said is that to build on is that New Zealand's really good at exporting not just product but innovation. My role in Karma Drinks, that brand and innovation is all out of New Zealand, but manufacturing for Europe is in Europe. So therefore, they've got a different supply line challenges, but they're not about trying to get air freight out of Auckland. So I think we've got to start really thinking collaborative, not just collaborative, but also really in a diversified manner. How are we going to make our revenues? Is it all going to be the way we did before? Are we going to diversify into that piece? I'll make it through my IP, and this piece I'll make through physical product, etc. And it's that acceleration of thinking that really buoys me at the moment, because it's the speed in which you can do that thinking. I've seen strategies done in days rather than months, and actually being able to then really test and learn and implement them in the markets.
Right, James. You mean you're experiencing that pivoting and that speed of your customers changing their business models so quickly. I understand you're doing. You've got a very deep relationship that's emerging now with Holland and Barrett. what's your experience of having to keep up with a customer that keeps pivoting? Is it making your life easier, or is it actually making it harder in the short term?
Well, I mean, I think they're obviously facing some major challenges over there. I had a call with them a couple of nights ago, I think, and don't quote me on these numbers, but their current online business represented about 20 or 30% of their revenue. They had a 3-year goal to get that up to 60%. It's up to 60%, or I think maybe just above, in a 4-week period. So they just simply don't have the infrastructure in the background to support that. Where you'd normally get a product delivered over a couple of days, it's now taking up to 2 weeks. So they're getting a huge amount of customer complaints, which is another reason that they've just simply turned off a whole lot of products, is because they don't want to lose customers. So we're very quickly setting up our own e-commerce site in the UK. It should be online within 2 weeks, just to give us another channel to their consumer. But there's certainly challenges for the traditional retailers as well.
Yeah.
But everyone talks about this pivot, and there's a really good webinar by a talented marketer, Mark Ritson, that came out last week in the UK. And he sort of spoke, everyone talks about the new normal and life's going to change forever. And but he sort of cuts through a lot of that and talks about, mad cow disease, for instance, in the UK. 60% of people said they will never, ever eat UK beef again. And obviously that didn't ring true for very long. So, we talk about the new normal, but I think things will eventually come. We can't forget the existing channels that we're in and think that it's all going to go online. Holland & Barrett, for instance, I think they've still got about 100 stores closed, but as people become more complacent over there during lockdown, the foot traffic's increased, their stores are running, not back to normal, but not as bad as everybody assumed it would be. So
right.
I think we can't forget our traditional markets as well. We've got to, we've got to still bank on them being there in the future.
Yeah, and invest in those relationships as well. Frank Owen, from an F&B point of view, are there certain parts of the markets that are really going off at the present moment in terms of demand? Have the shape of the F&B markets changed significantly during this crisis?
Well, I think the comment around that would be around luxury and premium related brands, because certainly luxury brands, the shine is moving off that, at least in the short term. A lot of local focus. So consumers are thinking very carefully about where they're putting their money, not just because of the fact, of course, they're unsure about where their incomes are coming from. Big difference between Europe and the United States is that there is substantial employment support in Europe across the whole bloc. And yet that can't go on forever. So the duration of the lockdown is on people's minds with respect to that. And so therefore they're carefully thinking about where they're putting their money. And also there is a degree of, should we be really cluttering our lives with items that we don't necessarily need, and we should perhaps be focusing more on the basics. And I think that's an example of where we could well see some consumer behaviour shift. We're already seeing it at the moment. How quickly it will bounce back, we'll have to see. There is definitely going to be a look at where am I spending my money luxury wise versus basic and essentials wise.
Yeah.
Andy, can I add to that? Because I think the other thing we're seeing is this real shift to consumers looking more deeply into the story and the purpose behind the businesses. This profit, only profit, is something that we're seeing consumers getting more uncomfortable with. And I think actually this is an opportunity I've been talking about in the UK for where the UK can really decide which companies it wants in its economy of tomorrow. Does it want the companies that are delivering beyond profit, that are thinking about the environment, the communities, etc. And we're seeing traction around our messaging, just really rising us above our ethical trading messaging, etc. That's really key to Volcano Coffee Works. So those stories, I think the days of because I can make it and sell it are diminishing. Consumers are really, I completely support Frank says, they're really deciding where they're putting their money, and they want to know more than what's in it for them.
So I'm sensing an element of optimism in the conversation this morning around an opportunity that has shifted its space. The challenge for anybody sitting here this morning is to work out, is this a change in my strategy I've got to make, or a change in my business? And just to turn for your perspective, Catherine, please, on this. when we're looking at an opportunity here with perhaps a change in consumer needs and ethics, more like leaning towards more purposeful businesses, to businesses that can meet their needs better through direct and alternative channels. This is kind of feels like massive business transformation. What advice do you have on the first steps that we can take as business owners here to be able to evaluate this opportunity and see if we can start to step forward and lean into it?
Look, it's a great question. I would say don't make assumptions. We know that this is a big business challenge. It's an even bigger human challenge. And I think some of the things that are in the DNA of being a Kiwi are the things that have kept us safe through this pandemic. One is that we all love the great outdoors. So if you think about at a root level, the pandemic, if you're inside and you're not airing your home, or if you're not getting fresh air, if you're not eating well, if your immunity's low, you're more at risk. Yeah. So I think we've had a collective response in New Zealand from the Director of General of Health, the Prime Minister. All of the conversations we're having are around be kind, look after yourselves, look after each other, look after your well-being. And I think that's a message that collectively New Zealand can take to the world. We did have an opportunity because we were an island nation, but we also have done a whole lot of things like raise our immunity and, to James's point, increased our uptake of manuka honey and eating more vegetables. Now they sound like very day-to-day conversations, but they are the reality of the world right now. So what can New Zealand do to help strengthen that message and collectively get great nutrition and health thinking to the world? Because for the next 2 years at least, that's going to be a massive market opportunity. And then when we come back from the frontline product delivery to the supply chains, what can our IT companies do around helping to strengthen the supply chains? Or, for example, in my teams, I'm challenging my great consultants to think about transformational process design and how they might use augmented and virtual reality to help the organizations that are digitally transforming to morph even more quickly. So when you just think of the human things, that drives the whole chain of opportunity.
So part of that human perception is how people look at us as New Zealanders and New Zealand businesses inside the UK and Europe. Peter, from your perspective as a Kiwi deep in London there, what are the benefits of being a New Zealand business right now that you think that the audience could potentially leverage in the coming weeks?
I think firstly, Kiwis in general are quite well liked, and we fit in all parts of society, and it's easy being a Kiwi, generally speaking, in the UK and across Europe. I think it's something that you can leverage certainly on a one-to-one basis, and it's very easy to socialize. But I think ultimately, would people buy stuff because it's a Kiwi company? And I think the answer is it depends. If it's an authentic brand, if it's to do with something that's about New Zealand, that's actually a really beneficial thing, then certainly use that strand. But ultimately, if being Kiwi doesn't actually make a difference to whether that decision is made or not, then perhaps it can go against you. In other words, the UK bank wishing to buy some software from a company that is largely based in New Zealand and supported in New Zealand, that's a risk because it's so far away and there could be issues in terms of getting people up, etc. So I'm sure Frank V will know this. I mean, it's you can't go in there with the Kiwi sort of flag, otherwise it may actually lose the deal.
Right. You got to deliver.
Yeah,
you got to deliver, Peter. Peter, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So just be cautious about how you use brand NZ, and we're all proud Kiwis up here, and obviously Kia does an amazing job, and Tanya, who's in the audience, she'll kick me, but even though she's in New Zealand, she's open for business for the UK. So reach out to her. She's an incredible networker, and she's definitely someone that you should get to know if you can.
Yeah, Frank, could you just expand your thinking on that? I mean, plainly you're taking a New Zealand business and taking it global at the moment. When you say it's about delivery, what else should we be considering in the services space when we're taking a New Zealand business across the new market?
well, a few people, Catherine started off as collaboration is really important. So we've developed relationships with a dozen service companies, right, as our channels through to customers. That helps provide local credibility to what Peter pointed out, the issue of delivering from down under and so on. So there's a whole lot of other stuff besides, but it's the people thing that's really, really important, is having that, the local knowledge, the local relationships that you build on, and commit to the market. Whilst half of us are here in New Zealand, I think most of us spend pretty much all our time in the UK. And that's really important for us as owners and founders, and those people considering going to the market. You've got to go there once we can actually get on planes.
Yeah, which may be a little while. And we're going back to the point about virtual trade show. Emma,
Andy, can I add to that? Because I think the other thing is about using experts. New Zealand is what we're brilliant generalists, and that's why we're amazing at doing early businesses and getting things going. But I think one of my learnings from my time in the UK has been that we need to learn to bring in experts sooner, and that real deep expertise. And that's where you can find, and I've got to check myself on this as well every day. One of the things, for example, there's a group in the UK called Young Foodies. Yes. And it's a collaboration of, it's a membership organisation for challenger brands. I've only been part of that for 6 months. I've learned so much by being involved in that with these are challenger brands that are selling into the supermarkets. So the conversations around Holland and Barrett, James, we've had live about who's had this, how's it working, and it's a real everyone working together to help the brands, everyone succeed. So, but in that you hear the experts and you can see where people are using experts, and New Zealand needs to remember that we're great generalists, but we do also need expert help.
Yeah, and I guess this is where the NZT and the Beachhead scheme can also support as well.
And Kia.
And Kia as well, very much so on top of that. And in the follow-up emails out to everybody here, we'll be putting contact details across this and for those different elements and for those different links so you can follow through. But it kind of feels like lots of this is about you stepping out of your own comfort zone here and actually making contacts that you may not have made in the past. It's up to us all to transform ourselves as people as well as to transform those connections with the business. Hamish Conway, unnecessarily quiet in the corner of my screen up top there, but you've been watching the feeds really carefully. Not like you to be quiet. You're a busy man. I think it's probably time to run another poll, just looking at the clock here, to try and trap in on the weekly sentiments of how everybody is feeling about their export markets right now.
Okay, we'll run this poll, and we'll, so here we go, poll number 2. So this here's, it's really compared to last week. For those of you that have been on this call, or even if you haven't been on this call previously, are you more or less confident of a recovery in your export markets, whether they be the UK, Europe, or elsewhere? So I've just clicked that one there to go. So let's just get a sense of where people are at. So just while that's ticking away there, people are, yeah, we're 33% of the way there. That is good.
Top of that. And we'll come back to the answers to that in just a little while. Just reaching out to everybody as well. If you've got some questions you'd like the panel to answer, throw them into the Q&A section there. And if you've got any thoughts as well, then keep them coming on the chat. Just turning to back to the world of technology at the present moment, over towards Frank. Frank V on this one. Managing my Franks today. Frank, have you got any predictions about opportunities for Kiwi tech companies inside the UK and Europe over the coming months?
Might be muted.
I think you may be muted there, Frank.
Here we go. Sorry about that. Firstly, check in with Kia. Yep. Secondly, if you've got products that actually can save organisations money, especially in the digital area, and particularly in contact centres where they are struggling with the volumes. If there's anything that you've got on your kit bag that actually can help companies with reducing costs, with actually handling customer call volumes better, understanding customers, Even with what the UK is really grappling with is people just working from home. All the technology support that's required there is a big thing. Yeah, there's an interesting one that's come more and more that we've noticed. This is maybe more in Catherine's area, I'm not sure, is actually basically supporting the distributed workforce. And that covers all aspects of the human condition, if you like, from mental issues, from schooling, from partner issues. There's a whole lot of stuff where people are literally cooped up in their homes. And this is the UK, particularly in big cities like London. It's not like New Zealand. People don't live in homes like we live in New Zealand. So it's a very, very different and challenging, can be quite challenging environment for people. So anything there where Kiwis are good at providing those services that support the humans in terms of this world that we're in at the moment, and cutting costs at the corporate level in terms of their servicing their customers.
Thank you, Frank. And just on that point, just an open question for anybody on the panel. We've got a question just coming from the floor here with an attendee who's concerned that it's difficult to create the right real-world connections at a time when the entire market is in lockdown. Have you got any tips about how to replace the rapport-building ability of being face-to-face when we're all so disparate and geographically dislocated? Anybody have a point of view on that? Catherine, perhaps?
I think Emma said it earlier, think about pay it forward. So when you have a conversation with a potential client, really think about where they are in their life at the moment, think about where their organisation is, and think about something that you can offer in terms of insight or even something deeper or more real that will help ease some pressure. So as an example, when I'm having conversations with UK clients at the moment, I do take real time to understand how they are, how they're feeling. Sometimes they may not want to share that, but people are more open to talking about challenges. And within SysDoc, right through our workforce, we have mental health first aiders. So we're talking to clients about whether having mental health first aiders would be really useful to them. And as was noted a moment ago, someone working in a flat share situation or in a high-rise apartment building, they may be feeling really stressed just by the work environment. So it's about how can you help alleviate that. And really important to note is Kiwis are very direct. That's in our DNA. And there are some fantastic things about being very direct and very focused. When people are burning, it doesn't work. You have to take the time to actually really listen. I keep saying it, it's the human side of things, and think about modifying the way that you interact to the situation you're in.
Yeah, excellent, thank you. Now over to you, Hamish, just for any more questions that are coming from the floor right now.
Yeah, so we've got a few questions here that I think just looking at the clock, we should have a closer look at there. And so I've got a question here from Robin saying, prior to COVID, the story behind a product was an important factor to influence buyers, you know, in terms of the origin of the story and how it all came about. But has the rhetoric changed now, or is the focus more on health and nutrition? You know, so even James, that could be a good one for you to answer, you know, given, you know, you've got with Manuka honey, the New Zealand story, and from hive to the shelves. Do you think that, you know, that rhetoric changes, or that messaging to the market is changing?
Yeah, look, I think the story and the New Zealand story is still very important for us going forward. And while we're in a unique position now in terms of, you know, we're seeing a spike in sales and people wanting our product, you know, we are under no illusion that as people's discretionary income becomes less, what are we going to be doing in 6 months' time? Because and with the panic buying I mentioned earlier on the pre-call, you know, how many people have got a year's worth of honey sitting in their cupboards right now? So we're sort of looking 3-4 months ahead when the recession really starts to bite. We're looking at ongoing campaigns of marketing immunity, and so that people still have that at front of mind. But the story is very important. And interestingly, again, in the UK, we're seeing people buy our product So the main retailers we're in, 99% of our product would sell at 49% of RRP. But we're still seeing people buying now at full price, and there's other options for them to buy, but they're buying into our story. So we really market a hive to home traceability story, and they're buying into our story. So I think it's really, really important that we, or more important than ever, I guess, that we have a strong brand story, and that brand equity will help us sell through these tough times.
So on that, James, if maybe for a question for Emma, if you do have a strong brand story and you're a really good F&B products coming out of New Zealand, is this actually the best time for a long time to enter that market and to tell that story?
Yeah, I think the health story isn't just the individual health; it's the planet health, and that's where the environment messaging really comes in strongly as well. Yeah. Potentially, it is. The challenge is how to do it. I don't think the UK has. I think it's had its first tremor. I don't think we've had the real shake yet. That to me comes in when the end of the furlough scheme happens. I mean, the UK government has effectively sent 3.2 million people on holiday just when we need them most. So because of how they've done the furlough rules. So 2/3 of my people are furloughed, and I can't have any work communication with them. I can check in on their mental wellness and make sure they're okay, but that's it. So the loss of human capital in the market at the moment is huge. And I see there's going to be, and really in the end of May, when those furloughs can start tailoring off and other cash flow in the businesses dry up, that's when we're going to see the real hit on the workforce that you're seeing in the US, right? So I don't think we're through this, and that really is the whole point. I think in light of James's point is that we're really at the beginning, and what you have to be is incredibly nimble and fast to continue to have a first mover advantage. New Zealand has that first mover advantage in a domestic economy situation. And I think New Zealand is open for business, but can also bring businesses, can import a huge amount more to then export out as well. Whether that's in the film industry coming into a safe environment for the next few months. So that's. But if you talk about going to the UK, yes, it is an opportunity. But if you think you can do it like we did it 6 months ago, of everyone get on a plane and go individually, it will not work. You have to come together and figure out how you can work together, pay forward together. And who has the relationship with one retailer that can get you in there while you get them in somewhere else? It's too hard to do this on our own.
Yeah.
Andy, can I bring in just a little subject that was big news last year called Brexit? It hasn't really been raised, and it's gone from our language, but it's happening. So the UK it's left the EU. So from the end of this year, unless there's a delay, which I don't think there's going to be from the UK government, the chances of an FTA with New Zealand and the UK is going to happen pretty quickly. Yeah. And therefore, there's going to be a raft of new opportunities coming through that perhaps don't exist today. But I wouldn't be surprised that new doors will be opening up fairly soon. That's going to encourage opportunities. And of course, NZTE is heavily involved with that. And there is also an FTA with the EU in discussion. It may take a bit longer, though, for that to come through. But the UK is going to be very open for business. And I think it's important for people just to watch what's going to happen there. And it's going to be just a matter of months before some details are going to start coming through.
I must admit, it's been a long time since I've heard the word Brexit in a conversation quite so optimistically in itself. But that truly is a reason to be cheerful. Speaking of reasons to be cheerful, I'm just going to run around. We're just about out of time, unfortunately, today. Catherine, could you just give us a reason to be cheerful about the UK and Europe at the present moment from our perspective?
Look, we're great partners. We're great trading partners. We've been friends forever. I'm glad Brexit was mentioned because it's a world of opportunity for us to strengthen those former ties that we had and to work together in a really positive way. I'm very optimistic against the backdrop.
Thank you. Frank, Owen, have you got a reason to be cheerful?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're edgy, we're nimble, and we're creative, right? And many people in Europe at the moment are sitting back and wonder what's hit them, right?
Yeah.
So we've got the opportunity to take some first mover advantage, but we should do that on the basis of reality rather than what we project as what we think is going on. But if we can do that, then there is some good low-hanging fruit out there.
That's great. Thank you, Frank. James, from the reality of Taranaki today, have you got a reason to be cheerful about this market?
Yeah, look, as I mentioned earlier, we're in a really lucky industry at the moment, but as a country, we're a large food and beverage producer. During a recession, people are going to eat out less, so supermarket products, FMCG goods are potentially going to go really well looking forward. And back to the original question about building rapport, I spend most of my life in market and my sales team do the same. But if you go to a meeting at Woolworths, for instance, in Australia, you're in a meeting with your buyer for 20 minutes, and after 19 minutes, the next meeting is waiting at the door trying to kick you out. So, you're speed dating the whole time. What I've found with the Zoom calls is these supermarket buyers are working from home. They're a little bit more relaxed. The calls are going on for up to an hour sometimes, and you're actually getting a really good chance to build rapport. So try and use it to your advantage through this period, because when we go back to normality, it'll be back to those 19, 20-minute meetings, and you kicked out the door. So you can flip it and see it as a positive.
It's great to hear that actually, like the remoteness here is actually helping us to get better rapport in some examples. Thank you.
And I don't know how many of you have got the House Party app on your phone, but I'm connecting more with my friends around the world and having more Friday night beers than ever. So we need to see some positives.
There is. Frank V, a reason to be positive from you?
Yeah, absolutely, because what COVID has done is bring a whole lot of change in the sectors we're operating in. In Uber Eats case, it's just accelerated their business, particularly in Paris and London. That's good for us. In the banking insurance world, well, people are going to still need banks and insurance going forward. It might slow things might change a bit, but it's going to be more digital. I like that.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Frank. And the last words to you, Emma, please, on this, from your perspective.
I'm very optimistic about the UK, and having spent 20 years in the UK, the British are very resilient as a population. They're the people you want to be in the trenches with. They learned that in the World Wars. So I am very positive that they will find a way to innovate and grow through this as a country. Even with Brexit, I was very supportive of remaining in the EU, but we are. So we now need to move forward. And I think if the country can use this as a way to meet their other objectives around environment and how they want to live as a society, the way they've protected the NHS during this time shows that there is a collective support network in the UK. And I echo James, we've had hour-and-a-half calls with Ocado, which we would never have had pre-COVID. So there is opportunity, but you have to be fast, you have to think creatively, and you have to think in a more diverse way than we have traditionally had to do.
This feels like this is a challenge for us as individuals, not just for our businesses. It's the way that we think as well as what we do. We're right out of time on that. We're right at the top of the hour. This has been a hugely stimulating conversation, and I just want to extend our thanks on behalf of Hamish and myself, and all the people who've been attending this, to all the thanks to all the panelists, to Peter, to Catherine, to Frank and James and Emma on top of that. And to everybody out there, please come back the same time next week, when I think we're going to be looking towards our closer neighbours into Australia then. But watch out for the emails coming through with information, watch out for the reruns and for the clips, for the opinion pieces, and watch out for each other. Until then, until next week, take care of yourself, and we'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Good stuff.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thanks for being there. And notice the confidence. Confidence has increased. Huge. So that's great. Brilliant.
We lost our poll. All right.
Did the poll not show?
It did. I didn't. We're going to drop the recording.
Yeah.
We done?
We are done.
Oh, well done.
Thank you so much, everybody. That was super.